Hello everybody, welcome back to the Along Come Norwich YouTube channel. Norwich City have confirmed the signing of Adam Forshaw on a free, and this is the first video on this channel, the first transfer, we'll call it a player profile video. The purpose of this is to mainly give you just a little bit of insight into Norwich City's new signings. We'll start with Adam Forshaw, who, as I said, has joined Norwich City on a free. This is just a little bit of research that I've done. It's not some incredible analysis that perhaps you might find from some of the more professional outlets, but I've done a bit of research. Hopefully this is something you will find useful. Now, first and foremost, Adam Forshaw is a name that I recognise instantly, a player that I would consider myself fairly familiar with. I'm interested to know if that's the same case for you, in terms of whether you know of him already. I certainly did. So this research was interesting to sort of perhaps dive into the nooks and crannies and trends of his career. At face value, before we get into anything, I think it's a pretty good signing. On a free, you can't really go wrong. Low risk, high reward. That same saying that we seem to constantly be churning out about Norwich City signings. But as you'll see alongside me, there's a little bit of space for some notes. I think it'll come up with 6 key points. I've got more than 6 points in front of me, but those should help you follow along the video. So first and foremost, Adam Forshaw, 31 years old. He's English. He's 5'7". He's a defensive midfielder by trade. He's right-footed, and he's currently a free agent, but was most recently at Leeds United. He joined there in the season that Daniel Farke joined Norwich City, so the 2017-2018 season. His youth career was at Everton, so he's a Scouser. He then went to Brentford, then to QPR, and then to Middlesbrough. I think there was a couple of chop and changes in terms of his Everton career, and I think he went to Brentford, then to QPR, then back to Brentford, and I don't know. But he ended up at Middlesbrough before Leeds. Leeds and Borough, his 2 teams that he spent the most time at. And something that surprised me for a player who I was quite familiar with was what he achieved in the game. So the first thing would be that he was a League One runner-up with Brentford in 2013-2014. He was a runner-up in the Championship with Middlesbrough in 2015-2016. That was under Aita Karanka. And he was a Championship winner with Leeds in the COVID season, although he played 7 games in that under Marcelo Bielsa. In that Brentford season, 2013-2014 in League One, he won Player of the Year. He won PFA, or he got into the PFA Team of the Year, played 39 games. So according to the stats and the trophies that I'm sure are in his cabinet at home, he was the best player, which for me is quite the achievement, quite an impressive achievement. More recently, his football hasn't probably been as consistent as perhaps he would have liked. Leeds have been, I think it's fair to say, and I'm not just saying this, but they've been a bit of a mess, haven't they? They're in a massive transition, ironically, with the guy who led our first proper transition for quite some time. He missed the 2020-2021 season because of a hip injury that kept him out of the game for 18 months, which is always kind of sad to see. But it seems as if he's back, and you can probably never really fully be over that injury, but he's played a decent amount of football since. A couple of things, and my sort of sources, not sources, where I get my information from, so I guess it's a source. I use SofaScore, Who Scored, Transfer Market, 3 very reliable, very interesting sources. Sometimes the stats will align, which is obviously good because it means they're consistent, but some have features that others don't. So if you ever wanted to do your own research, they're the 3 that I sort of typically rely on. In terms of the playing style and where he might fit in, before we get into some of the things that the websites were telling me, defensive midfielder seems very much like a cover option. I really don't think this is a bad signing at all. My immediate thought was that he perhaps could fill that mould that Harrison Reed once was in. I don't think he was particularly a presence that it's not like when he left a gaping hole. There was already a gaping hole in that sort of defensive midfield position. Ollie Skip is the only player who's really filled that just brilliantly to the way that Norwich City fans wanted, which was put a tackling, cover the pitch, play the ball. This David Wagner style, I think, can survive without that. It very much is probably going to be a case of we're going to win 3-2, 4-3, like that 4-4 at Southampton was probably the perfect example where Norwich City will score goals, but perhaps not be the greatest at defending. Forshaw seems like he'll come in and be a sort of cover in that area, which again, 31 years old, perfectly fine age, a player who He does carry some championship pedigree. You know, I really don't want to undersell him when I say he's a backup. But in terms of whether that injury is still looming, there's been an injury since. We'll sort of see how it goes. You know what Norwich City's luck is with injuries. So before we get into some heat maps, because there was 2 heat maps that I'll reference, which I'll bring up on the screen as well, which were quite interesting. I think it was, what was it, who scored? I always look at the player traits and the player styles to see, one, if it's a player that I don't know, to get an idea. 2, if it's a player that I am a little bit familiar with, it will help me sort of centre my views and I guess reinforce them. So in terms of the better sides of his game, it came up with 2 points: set pieces and tackling. Tackling, great. The weakness was concentration, which is an interesting thing. If you are perhaps a supporter of a team that Adam Forshaw has played for and you're familiar with this game, please in the comments let us know if that is if that's accurate. In terms of the playing style, it said sort of long diagonal balls, shooting from distance, tackles, and committing fouls. Very much sounds like a defensive midfielder. When I've watched him on the pitch, on TV, or whether it's against Norwich, because he's had a few run-ins with Norwich, you've always sort of noticed him, and this is where the idea of Harrison Reed comes in, where he's sort of this little low centre of gravity. You can't really knock him over. Not particularly quick, but not slow either. Gets around the pitch. I don't mean to be offensive, but quite ratty with his little tackles. Exactly what you want from that kind of player. Like a bit of a bulldog, really, I think is perhaps a more polite way of phrasing ratty. But, they all mean the same thing nonetheless. But the point here that I've got below is just cover for midfield options. There's absolutely no reason he can't he can't claim a position as his own. Stakey claim, I don't know. This is where I'm not a wordsmith, but there is absolutely no reason that he can't get into the team and solidify his position. It's not like someone is going to have to get injured, him play, and then he go back out. If someone gets injured, as is the cycle of football, he can come in and he can make that position his own, which, good luck to him in that regard. Now, in terms of backing up perhaps where we'd expect to see him on the pitch, the last thing we'll do is show you 2 heat maps. You have last season where he played 12 times in what I would describe as a fairly catastrophic season for Leeds in the Premier League. So as you can see, the heat map in 12 appearances perhaps isn't a fair reflection of what he is as a footballer. If you go back a further season where he played 22 times in the Premier League, so that would have been under Bielsa and Jesse Marsh, I believe. That for me is the heat map that I was expecting to see, where you look at the sort of his own half of the pitch. Really, you've got the entire midfield area covered a little bit further forwards in front of the halfway line. For me, I think that's what I'm expecting in terms of the ground that he will cover. But yeah, it's interesting, and the main point is there's no reason that at such a good age, with a good bit of championship pedigree, just EFL pedigree, and this idea that he is able to fill in a gap that some Norwich City fans, myself included, would like to see filled. It'll be interesting to see how that dynamic works. I hope that was a useful video for you. Your thoughts, I'd love to know them in the comments down below. Thank you for the support on the first video. Much appreciated. Always fun to talk about a Norwich City win. Here is to hoping that we shall be talking about another Norwich City win against Huddersfield. But yeah, thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to it if you fancy it. If you don't, fair enough. But I'll see you again very, very soon.